So much time on this channel and attempts to diverge into separate topics for my content production have proven unsuccessful. And after all this time, we still cannot get away from one painful constant that just has me talking about it way too much. One that brings me disappointment every time I set my eyes on it, but still forces me to discuss its constant slip-ups wherever I go: the Indian cricket team. The amount of times I've discussed the squad with disdain might be enough to make the average viewer believe that I'm an absolute execrator of Indian cricket altogether, which I certainly am. However, it makes it tough for one to claim that my annoyance is not justified. There were certainly days in the past where this team was incredible to watch, and even now there are times where they leave the entire rest of the world in awe of their sheer cricketing ability, but issues aplenty continue to plague them. One of which sticks out more than the rest, something that is so glaringly obvious it has been hotly debated by many an Indian in recent times: the way in which the Indian cricket team has utilized its young talent, or for that matter, the way they've utilized any talent with uncanny selection. Let's be real, the dudes on the committee cannot pick a team. A problem that's been especially apparent for a long time but has only come into main focus at the end of the Ravi Shastri and Virat Kohli era, and today thought it'd be fun and painful to dissect some of the players that were all too unfortunate to have been born into a mess of a cricket scouting nation, and some that might just have wasted their own talent. Before we begin, a quick word from our sponsor, Nobody. Before we look at the talent that the Indian team is currently wasting, let's look at the types of players that they've already wasted. Two players, and the earliest examples of the failure on the part of the Indian selection committee, are Rajinder Goyal and Padmakar Shivalkar. They played in a time where it was really tough for Indian bowlers, especially spinners, with the famous spin quartet of Chandrasekhar, Bedi, Prasanna and Venkat Raghavan. But nonetheless, these two bowlers were wasted beyond compare. They never even got a chance to show their skills on the international level, and well, I'll just let their domestic numbers speak for themselves. Shivalkar was able to scalp a total of 589 wickets from 124 games at an average of just 19.69, but Goyal was even better, picking up 750 wickets from 157 games at an insane average of 18.58. But despite their video game type stats, they still never got an India call-up. Just two players in and I've already gone into an unmatched depressive state. Another really early example of the BCCI appointed selection committee not seeing talent for what it really was is Sunil Valsan. Valsan was a supremely talented left-arm seamer who got a start for the Tamil Nadu state team in 1981. In the 1981-82 Ranji Trophy season, he put up a very solid performance, picking up 26 wickets in just 5 matches. Shortly afterward, he found himself a part of the 1983 World Cup squad, but despite his presence, he didn't get to play a single match, although he came close to getting to be an injury sub. Which is alright. They'd found a team formula that was working and didn't want to tamper with it, especially in the middle of a tournament. Apparently, he was a very loved member of the team, and his input was always welcome. Okay, yeah, so why didn't you just call the guy up for a single match throughout his career? That's right, it wasn't just the snub from the famous 1983 World Cup that constitutes the wastage of his talent. It's the fact that he didn't get a chance to represent the Indian national team all throughout the course of his career. He went on to play Ranji Trophy until 1987, representing Delhi and the Railways to close out his career. A career in which he took 225 wickets at an average of 25.35. Those aren't numbers to scoff at. Sadly, his career would end without the satisfaction of representing his nation, even though he came so close to doing so. Another player that fell by the wayside was genius leg spinner Lakshman Shivaram Krishnan, and unlike the ever-gracious Sunil Valsan, he got his chance to represent his nation in 1983 at the age of just 17, the youngest at that point to make a test debut for India. Shiva got off to an inauspicious start, going wicketless in his first ever game, and he would have to wait another year for a second chance at the test level. And in 1984, he seized his opportunity, picking up 12 wickets in his second test match, and another 4 wickets in the first innings of his third test match. The rest of the series, India were pummeled, and as a result, LS didn't take many wickets. The same happened in his 5th test as well. Now, to blame this completely on the selectors would be unfair, but getting dropped shortly afterwards simply for average numbers is tough to justify. Shiva would only get another test in Sri Lanka and 2 more in Australia to round out his illustrious 9-match test career. He just couldn't keep up with the competition, and it was time to move on. His ODI numbers were just as disappointing. With 16 matches, he managed 15 wickets at an average of 35.86. A talent that wasn't treated with enough care, he would play another 10 years of first-class cricket where he would convert himself to a batsman, with rumours of a return to the national team, all of which were dismissed and didn't end up coming true either way. If you think that's bad, sometimes players that played well most of the time and average on occasion got the boot as well. Narendra Hirwani, a 19-year-old leg spinner in 1988, or in other words, a leg spinner a little before Shane Warne made it fashionable, is an example of this. In just his first ever test match with the Indian cricket team, he did the unthinkable, taking 16 wickets across 2 innings against the West Indies at Chennai. That was the final match of a 4-game series. He continued his fiery streak, taking another 20 wickets in his next 3 tests. What's crazy is that throughout the next 8 years, Hirwani would only see himself play 13 more test matches, taking an additional 30 wickets at an average 30.31. The same would go for his ODI career, where he only got 18 games and still took a very good 23 wickets. A large part of this is the fact that he was speculated to have struggled on foreign pitches, but the only people really asking those questions were the English reporters at Wisden magazine. So, yeah. What really hurt Hirwani was the arrival of Anil Kumble, which sentenced him to a career that was largely domestic. He would finish his domestic career with an insane 732 wickets in 167 matches, and yeah, his 23-year first-class career came to a close in 2006. Ironically, 2 years later in 2008, he'd become a member of the National Selection Committee. This brings us to one of the problems with the selection approach. India has had a reputation for being unable to unearth quality fast bowlers, and the list of failures on their end to utilize the resources they'd been given is shocking, as is shown by the innate inability to preserve and protect a myriad of talented players like Atul Wasan, Vivek Razdan, Subroto Banerjee, Salil Ankola, Abhay Kuruvilla, Tinu Yohanan, Thiru Kumaran, and Debashish Mohanty, to name a few. As it was with Shivram Krishnan, 1 or 2 failures and these players were thrown out of the team. What's sad is that this culture still persists within the Indian team today. Nowadays, you have to be absolutely perfect as a cricketer for a long period of time like Virat Kohli was, or you have to be an absolute freak like Surya Kumar Yadav, or you have to be playing around a time where the selectors have their hands tied like KS Bharat. It's a formula that so many have tried and failed to crack, and it really just makes no sense sometimes. And you'll see that a little later with a few other players. The Rajesh Chauhan debacle clearly illustrates a problem within Indian cricket and their ideology. The dismissal of anything that's even slightly non-conventional. Chauhan was an off-spinner that played a key role in the Indian dominance of the 90s, quickly forming a useful trio with star spinners like Anil Kumble and Venkatapati Raju. Chauhan was unlucky enough to encounter placid pitches and had enough dealing with the scrutiny of the cricketing world around him, mainly for his awkward bowling action. He never lost a test match for the Indians and picked up 47 wickets in 21 matches, while sporting a rather paltry ODI record. But over the 5 years he played tests from 1993 to 1998 and the 4 years he spent in ODIs from 1993 to 1997, he was constantly berated for his weird bowling action, even having to go through a series of tests to prove his action was legal, much like the legend Muthaiya Muralidharan. The difference between Chauhan and Muralidharan had his captain Ranatunga for support, and eventually he was helped to earn the support of the Sri Lanka Cricket Board. What did Chauhan have? Nothing. Despite his attempts to get back onto the pitch after he was cleared for play, Chauhan was still denied. Eventually, without any support from Indian Cricket Administration, Chauhan faded out. 318 wickets in 99 first-class matches is nothing to sneer at, except if you're the Indian Selection Board. Remember David Johnson? Of course you don't, but the Karnataka cricketer was regarded as the fastest ever Indian bowler in the late 90s, an era that had Javagal Srinath and Venkatesh Prasad. He had a peculiar action similar to that of Lasith Malinga, but despite this, he only played 2 test matches in 1996 throughout his entire career, and just as an injury sub for Srinath. So, what exactly went wrong? Well, he had a peculiar action similar to that of Lasith Malinga. Once again, support for the talented bowler ran low. Insane that a guy with 125 wickets in 39 first-class games only gets 2 starts for the national team, but hey, I guess the selection committee knows what they're doing. Praveen Amre, the protege of famous coach Ramkant Achrekar, and interestingly enough, the classmate of Sachin Tendulkar, was a quality Indian middle-order batsman. And yeah, you guessed it, despite an above-average career, he was dropped from the Indian team. Now to be fair, the early 90s was a time where Indian cricket was experimenting with a lot of young talents, but this man surely deserved more of a shot than he got before he faded away into oblivion. And again, to be fair, his ODI record was slightly average, with 30 innings amounting to 513 total runs, but we have to remember that he was a middle-order batsman that often batted as low as number 7. However, there's really no excuse for him not getting more of a chance on the test level to see where he led. In 13 innings, an average upwards of 42, 425 runs, 350s and a century that came in his debut test against South Africa wasn't enough to save his 10-month test career from 1992 to 1993. The 90s saw much more wasted talent as well. Jacob Martin, Rishikesh Kanitkar, the hard-hitting Atul Bedade, Shiv Sundar Das and Akash Chopra are just some of the names on the list. Now we move into the early 2000s, the era of a new program called the Talent Resource Development Wing that became obsessed with finding new talent from rural parts of the Indian cricketing circuit, or at least parts of the circuit that were in Delhi, Chennai, Hyderabad, Bangalore, Mumbai, and Kolkata, which was revolutionary for the way that it put a scout in each and every nook and cranny of the country, allowing for players like the great MS Dhoni to be found. It also allowed for other players to be found, but this brings us to our next challenge. With even more talent scouting, how was the Indian Cricketing Selection Committee going to decide who stayed and who didn't? It was a tall task, but something I think the board would be able to handle maturely, right? Right? This is honestly one of the best times in terms of Indian cricket talent evaluation. We as a country were able to find some of the greatest modern talents the world has ever seen from 2000 to 2006, and such led us to a World Cup victory in 2011. But there was still an abundance of players that were hopelessly tossed aside. Mohammad Kaif is probably the largest example of this. Known for his incredible style of batting and his almost electric fielding abilities, Kaif used his incredible skill set to captain the India U19 team to a World Cup victory in 2000. He was the toast of a cricket-crazy nation, and at number 7, he worked perfectly in the scheme of the genius captain Sourav Ganguly, whose willingness to include him in the side led him to what he's best known for, that being his amazing match-winning innings in the 2002 NatWest series against England at Lord's. Between 2002 and 2004, he was the backbone of the middle order, but he struggled for consistency through 2005. He found it difficult to adapt to the changing conditions of world cricket, and yet was not back through his tough patch of form. By 2006 he was out of the Indian scheme of things, and by 2009 he was axed from the Rajasthan Royals IPL squad. He continued to play domestic cricket and turned his home state Uttar Pradesh into a force to be reckoned with before he switched to Andhra Pradesh in 2014. Then found himself in Chhattisgarh in 2016 before retiring from all forms of the game in 2018. The selectors simply didn't see him for what he was. A finisher, a savior. Number 7s find it tough to stay in the game for too long due to lack of overs faced. Kaif finished with 4 centuries, all of which came in overseas conditions with the chips against the team. He was a class act, but all it took was a couple of bad matches for his name to be stricken from the Indian team for the remaining 2/3 of his professional career. Irfan Pathan again was another player who admittedly didn't live up to his hype as the next couple Dev, but there's a case to be made for the fact that he was horribly mismanaged. First came the appointment of Aussie coach Greg Chappell, who himself said that Australia cannot afford to waste talent like India does. Irfan was one of the greatest all-rounding talents of his generation, and Greg Chappell was a man who likes things his way, which is an admirable quality. He didn't see the appeal of Pathan, criticizing his technique and action, indirectly imploring him to change things up a little bit. When he started his career, Irfan had a non-standard bowling grip where his thumb was curled inwards, and he was holding the ball between the index and middle fingers and the knuckle of his thumb. Despite this unconventional grip, he was able to extract almost an impossible amount of banana-like swing from the ball at north of 140 km per hour, but he struggled with the outswinger. He sought out the help of legendary bowler Wasim Akram, who advised him to change his grip a little to match the conventions of the traditional swing bowler. A decision that was risky in all spectrums, and a decision that led to a lack of consistency. If there was pace, there wasn't any swing. If there was swing, there wasn't much pace. But for a player that was unable to manage all the change, he wasn't given the support he needed. Yes, he was largely misled on his own, but the management in charge failed to guide him through a journey that should have seen much more development, which is a nice way of saying nobody likes Greg Chappell. Yes, I agree that he left a good philosophy and stuff, but he was also a cold, sneering mess. The list of Indian talent wasted throughout the 2000s and 2010s runs longer. There was Suresh Raina, who was sniggered at and never truly blossomed into the great player that was expected of him. Munaf Patel, who was pretty lazy to be fair. RP Singh, whose steep rise preceded a slow decline. Shrishant, who still pleads innocent to a spot-fixing ban. Karun Nair, whose story was kinda weird, he was essentially dropped after scoring a triple century. Robin Uthappa, who fought a hard battle against depression and came out on top, sadly at the expense of the illustrious career he had waiting for him. But wait, there's more, and by more I mean S. Badrinath, Wasim Jafar and Manoj Tiwari. Ah yes, the modern failures, those that represent the boneheaded ignorance of those on the selection committee in the modern times. I'm not going to go and do career features on all these players, but their names alone make a point. In IPL 2021, batsman Ruturaj Gaikwad won the ever-coveted orange cap and spearheaded a brilliant opening partnership between him and Faf du Plessis that led CSK to a title, but didn't earn himself a call-up in the following limited over series in South Africa. Yes, I know he wasn't present for the T20 World Cup as well, but the team selection was finalized and released before IPL started, so there was no way he could have been a part of that. But Sportism, how oh how could you say that Gaikwad didn't have a fair shot when he played in the Sri Lanka tour in July of 2021? Well, he only got 2 games because half the players had COVID. He was basically on the C team, on an already subpar Indian team that was giving the star players some rest. He needs a start. Just look at his technique. He's pretty much the perfect test player. Look at Gaikwad's List A career in comparison to that of Shubman Gill, who's played 7 more games than Gaikwad has. He loses to Gaikwad in every category. Am I trying to say that Gill is worse than Gaikwad? No. But who got their chance to represent India first as opposed to who deserved it first? Am I just saying that because my dreams are filled with images of him lifting the World Cup trophy and being carried on the shoulders of his teammates after having hit a match-winning double century in the final? Thankfully, he's been taken in for the Indian tour of West Indies. Maybe his last chance to get himself a spot in the starting 11, or at least the probables for the ODI World Cup. Guess who doesn't get that chance though? Sanju Samson. One of the biggest steals on the international level for the Indian cricket team is the likes of Sanju Samson being constantly and consistently snubbed. He's a student of the game, a captain that led the Royals to a finals berth in 2022 and had a sudden unlucky collapse in the 2023 IPL season that really started on top of things. We haven't even gotten to the fact that he's a destructive batsman and a great wicketkeeper. Instead of selecting him for the past few years, take a wild guess as to who the Indian selectors would rather have their eye on as a replacement for Rishabh Pant in the limited overs format. Ishan Kishan and KL Rahul. Seriously? You have a dominant and talented player sitting there. The answer to your star keeper batsman's untimely absence just sitting there right under your noses, and you choose to go with a guy who's been an emerging talent for the past 5 years and a waste of space that had a good World Cup in 2019 and is only useful when he's playing for either the Lucknow Super Giants or the Punjab Kings. Samson will forever be the person I back in the next generation of Indian cricket, but sadly I'm not high up enough for my opinion to matter. A lot of people will agree with me on this one though. Ambati Rayudu. Ambati Rayudu scored upwards of 600 runs in IPL 2018. He worked on himself and turned into a complete cricketer that everyone had expected when he first burst onto the scene. He scored an ODI century in his first series and he averaged above 40 in ODIs. He was almost a surefire candidate for the World Cup in England 4 years ago. But guess who the selectors went with instead of him? Vijay Shankar. That's right, Vijay Shankar. The guy whose only accolade whilst playing in the IPL was, well, playing in the IPL. When asked about it, the board simply said that the coach wanted more three-dimensional players. Not exactly one of Ravi Shastri's greatest masterstrokes, but somehow he still had a place for Kedar Jadhav in his side. Devdutt Padikkal had a great IPL 2020 and an excellent IPL 2021. Here's an idea. How about we surmise his potential in 2 T20I matches? Okay, sure, Padikkal was a bust the past couple of years, but it was the fault of those unable to see his talent that he wasn't pulled into the spotlight quicker enough at the beginning of his career. Rajat Patidar, a man that thoroughly showed up and showed out and did incredible things for his IPL franchise RCB in 2022, saving them twice in the playoffs, still hasn't gotten a single India call-up, and was left out from the South Africa T20I series the same year. Shikhar Dhawan, who despite struggling throughout his career outside Indian conditions was grossly overlooked in 2021 and 2022, and was unluckily injured against Australia in the 2019 World Cup. All of these names are the players that have been wasted by the Indian selection process. All of this talent, and yet we still wonder how we're so spoiled for choice while housing the innate inability to win games. All of these bring shame and sadness to those who call themselves fans of the Indian cricket team. And while all this goes on, we sit and genuinely ponder the reasons as to why we still can't compete for trophies despite having so many options and stacked teams even with a few mistakes in selection. This isn't about the spite I have towards this team. This isn't about any hate I might foster for them. I love this cricket team. This isn't about me being an anti-nationalist or any of the other things that people who ask questions are called nowadays. This is about the clear mistakes that have been made. This is about the talented youth cricketers of the country not getting their fair shot at representing their nation, but speaking in the current context, this is about a couple of players who still continue to get chance after chance on the highest level. This is about the washed-up Rohit Sharma continuing as captain for the Indian team when he's clearly past his prime in terms of wit and batting capability. This is about sticking with KL Rahul for so long without seeing him for the subpar cricketer that he's been for a while now. This is about the below-average Murali Vijay getting chance after chance despite being quite frankly a bad batsman just because one of the long-time members of the selection panel was from Tamil Nadu too. This is about not being ready to drop the legacy picks that only impressed back in the day, players like Cheteshwar Pujara that make me feel like I'd rather watch an airport safety video than their batting. This is about popping out of nowhere with the KS Bharat situation when you had Sanju Samson at the ready. This is about the team remaining stagnant for as long as possible in spite of the talented group of players in place so far. Look at the squad for the tour against the West Indies. Combating your problems in the bowling department with bowlers like Jaydev Unadkat and Mukesh Kumar is not the way to go. This is about neglecting Avesh Khan for the past 2 years while spoiling Prasidh Krishna, the most overrated bowler I've seen since I started talking myself up during PE class with all the chances he could ask for. This is about mysteriously getting rid of Arshdeep Singh at the peak of his introduction to international cricket. This is about losing out on your golden opportunity to test all of your talent in 2021 and 2022 and instead going with possibly the most undeserving players you could have chosen. This is about shooting yourself in the foot everywhere you go. The BCCI and we Indian fans love to boast of progress, of development. We claim to support anyone who gets in the way of our constructive progress. But who do we support? An intensely overhyped player who used to be good but is now only kept relevant by relationship drama, a player whose batting makes Kale look interesting, a wicketkeeper whose only real qualification to be playing for India is a 6 he hit 2 years ago, captain who kicks the ball at his teammates whenever they drop a catch and hasn't scored a 50 since Genghis Khan ruled over Mongolia, a bowler who is the living definition of hit or miss, a batsman who's as inconsistent as housing prices in the USA, and a team that continually lives on false hope, providing the same to their fans at each and every tournament they are a part of. What they need is an overhaul. It's too late now because the World Cup is in a few months, but after we inevitably get blasted out of the water by some random team in the semi-finals, things need to change. Rohit Sharma isn't working anymore. Get him out of there. Hardik Pandya works well and has matured into a great captain for Gujarat. He knows the team inside out. Get him an armband. KL Rahul is done, and unless the above recommendations haven't worked out, he has no place back in the squad. Yashasvi Jaiswal should be in the squad for the 2023 World Cup if he cashes in during the Windies series. Ishan Kishan is too up and down to be given too many chances for India anymore. Sanju Samson needs and deserves a place in at least the ODI team. Also, the country needs to get over Prithvi Shaw until he starts getting runs against some actual bowlers. Ruturaj Gaikwad and test matches for India are 2 peas in a pod. Dhruv Jurel is a cool-headed batsman who needs to be tried and tested at least once or twice. They have so many players that need to be assessed on the international level, but they refuse to play the long game. I personally would much rather see a team of youngsters playing their first or second games lose early in the World Cup than watch our experienced veterans go into the semi-finals and screw up. Again. That's all I'm saying. Good day and stay safe.